Join me as I dive in the mind-blowing experiment to see how far people will go when they think authority is calling the shot. That's right. I'm talking about the Milgram experiment. It's one of the most famous psychological studies of all times, and for a good reason. It conceived by psychologist Stanley Milgram in the 1960s. It's aimed to explore just how obedient humans would be when faced with authority figures. What he discovered was nothing short of shocking, and it had a lasting impact on our understanding of human behavior. The Milgram experiment poses significant ethical dilemmas as it blurred the lines between psychological research and manipulation. Participants were led to believe that they were part of a learning exercise while they administered electric shocks to another person. Now, whenever they answered the question incorrectly, they would get electric shock. In reality, the real study was observing the participants themselves as they were pressured to continue administering electric shock, increasingly severe shock, despite of their own morale reservation. Now, the fact is, most participants went along with the experiment, even when they show clear signs of distress, raises uncomfortable questions about our willingness to follow orders, no matter what the cost. Now, this experiment has had a profound impact on our understanding of obedience and morality. Now, it's made us question whether we're capable of making sound moral judgment when influenced by the authority figure. Now, the results also sparked debates about the perils of blind obedience and the importance of critically evaluating the instructions we receive from those in power. Moreover, the Milgram. Now, the experiment has far-reaching implications for field education, where authority figures often hold significant sways over what we're taught and how we think. Now, the experiment's findings have also led to a re-evaluations of the roles of significant situation factors in shaping our behaviors. It has become clear that our actions are often determined by the specific contents we find ourselves in, rather than inherent moral character. Now, realization has significant implications for how we approach issues like corporate conformity, political obedience, and even the rise of the Nazi Party in World War II. One of the most striking aspects of the Milgram experiment is how it highlights the power of role playing in shaping human behavior. Participating were convinced they were taking part of a legitimate scientific study, and the perception alone was enough to make them override their own moral compasses. Now, this finding was a significant implication of our own understanding of how social roles and norms influence our actions. Now, let's dive deeper into the experiment setup and explore the psychological theories that explains the participants' behavior. Now, the experiment consists of three main components. You had the teacher, the learner, and the experimenter. The teacher was the participant themselves, responsible for administering the electric shock. The learner was the actor, pretending to be the fellow participant receiving the shock. Now, the experimenter was the authority figure instructing the teacher to continue with the experiment despite of the reservation. Now, participants' reactions were striking. Now, many exhibits visible signs of distress, from sweating and nervous laughter, as they struggled and reconciled their own moral values with the experimenter's instructions. Now, some even displayed a kind of dislocations as if they were observing their own actions from outside of their bodies. Now, these reactions are telling as they highlight the intense psychological conflict that arises with a personal morale clash with authority pressure. Now, one of the most revealing aspects of this experiment is the way participants justify their actions themselves. Can you believe that many convinced themselves that they were simply following orders, and that the experimenter was ultimately responsible for the consequences? That's interesting. Now, This kind of morale disengagement is a common coping mechanism, one that allows us to step aside our feelings of guilt and shame by attributing the blame to an external authority. It's the blame game. Now, uh, dramatizing of this conflict between personal morals and authority pressure is one of the most shocking aspects of the Milgram experiments. It's stunning to see how quickly participants surrender their autonomy, abandoning their own moral principles in favor of obedience to the experimenter. The phenomenon is all the more chilling when we consider the relevance of real-world scenarios where blind obedience can have devastating consequences. As we explore more shocking moments from this experiment, it's striking how dramatically the participants' moral values were overridden by the pressures to conform. One participant, for instance, continued administering shock even when the learner begged to be released, claiming they had a heart condition. Another participant was brought into tears, yet still continued with the experiment, convinced that the experimenter knew best. The Milgram experience serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of the unchecked authority and the importance of critical thinking in our daily lives. By understanding the psychological mechanism that drives our behavior, we could better resist the pressure to confirm and make choices that aligns with our own moral values. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the Milgram experiments. It's a so
Ready.
All right, join me as I dive deep into the dark secrets of the Stanford prison experiment and see if I can reveal the truth behind this shocking outcome.
Ready.
All right, the Stanford prison experiment is one of the most infamous psychological studies of all times. It was for a good reason. It was conducted in 1971 by the Stanford University professor Philip Zimbardo. The experiment was aimed to investigate the psychological effects of imprisonment on both the prisoner and the guard. That was supposed to be a 2-week study. It turned to a shocking display of human behavior, and today it remains a controversial topic in the field of psychology. Now, the Stanford prison experiment, a group of healthy male college students were randomly assigned to play the roles of either the prisoner or the guard in a simulated prison environment. What ensued was a series of disturbing events that pushed the boundaries of the human morality. The guards were given almost absolute power over the prisoners. They began to exert their dominance in brutal ways, while the prisoner became increasingly submissive and depressed. As the experiments progressed, the lines between the reality and the simulated prison environment began to be a blur. Now, guards started to take the rules too seriously, enforcing arbitrary rules and punishing the prisoners for minor infractions. Now, meanwhile, the prisoners became more and more desperate, trying to find ways to escape or resist the capture. The power dynamics at play were staggering, and it's chilling to think about how quickly the situation escalated. Now, the psychological issue that arose during this experiment were multifaceted. The prisoners experienced extreme stress, anxiety, and depression, while the guards began to show signs of sadism or authority. Now, it's clear that the experiment is trapped in some deep-seated psychological forces that are still not fully understood today. But in the simulated prison, the prisoners were arrested at their homes, taken to the jail, strip searched just like it would be in the real prison. Now, they were given uniforms and referred to them by the prison numbers instead of their names. The guards, on the other hand, were given complete authority over the prisoners with the exception of physical violence. All right. As the days went by, the prisoners started experiencing mental breakdowns, and some even began to develop psychological disorders. Now, the guards, on the other hand, seemed to be relishing the newfound power and often enforcing arbitrary rules and punishments. It's shocking to think that these were ordinary college students just a few days ago, not professional prison guards. And yet, they were capable of such cruelty. Now, one of the most disturbing aspects of this experiment was the way the prisoners started to internalizing their prison roles. They began to see themselves as inferior to the guards, as some even begged for mercy or even tried to escape. Now, the guards, on the other hand, became more and more aggressive. The experiment was eventually terminated after 6 days. Only 6 days they made it. When a researcher, Christina Maslock, was shocked by the extreme behavior she witnessed, the participants were debriefed and the experiment was shut down. But the efforts of the experiments lingered on, with the participants taking years to recover from the trauma they experienced. Now, that's a lot of trauma in just 6 days. Now, the Stanford prison experiment reveals that profound truths about human behaviors and the authority it shows us. Given in circumstances, ordinary people can become capable of extraordinary cruelty. It highlights the dangers of the unchecked power and the importance of accountability. In conclusion, the Stanford prison experiment is a powerful reminder of the darkness that lurks within all of us. It's a testament of the powers of the psychological manipulations, of the dangers of the unchecked authority. Now, what do you think about the Stanford prison experiment? Share your thoughts and comments below. And if you